So let's take a look at some organic. And what we're going to do is, the thing with organic, you can write the structure several different ways. The way I wrote it right here, we call this the expanded structure. Couple of things to remember. Carbon wants to have 4 bonds. That's key. And always remember when you're doing these structures, carbon wants to have 4, hydrogen wants to have 1. So a couple of things. This is called the expanded structure. What we're going to do, we're going to draw both the skeletal and the condensed structure of that. Again, different ways of drawing the same structure. Let's look at the condensed. So in the condensed, a couple of things. You always got to number the carbons in the chain because carbons can link up. I'm going to call it carbon number 1, 2, 3, 4. A couple of things to remind you when you're numbering these, you can number 1, 2, 3, 4. Or etc. You can go one direction or the other. It just depends on the circumstance. In this case, it didn't make any difference. But kind of keep in mind, when you number these carbons, you can start on the left-hand side, which is what we normally used to, because the way you write. But you can also start on the right-hand side to be aware of that. But each carbon's got to have a number. So on carbon number 1, I have 3 hydrogens. I have 1, 2, 3. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw CH3. And so that's going to correspond to carbon number 1. Carbon number 2, let's look at it. I have 1, 2 hydrogens, so I'm going to write CH2. And again, what's understood is that this carbon and this carbon are bonded together. That's understood. Carbon number 3, I have 2 hydrogens. I'm going to write CH2. So let's kind of do this. Let's kind of do this. And then carbon number 4 has 3 hydrogens. I'm going to write it CH3. So this right here is the condensed form. So again, in the condensed form, we don't write the hydrogen spread out like this. So this way is actually probably better when we first do it, at least for me. And then you can write it like this. Again, this corresponds to carbon number 1, 2, 3, and 4. The other form we're going to look at is the skeletal. Couple of things. In this case, we're not going to actually write out carbons and hydrogens. We're going to draw what they call vertexes with this. So, for instance, this is butane. This is actually butane, by the way. That's the gas that we use in fuels and stuff like that. I'm going to draw like this. Let me draw like this. And so each vertex is a carbon. So this right here is, this right here is carbon number 1. So that's right here. It's carbon number 2. It's carbon number 3. It's carbon number 4. So again, carbon kind of bends like this because they want to get the electrons as far away from each other as possible. We don't write the hydrogens. So no hydrogens are written. So usually we don't write the hydrogens, and each one of these is understood to be a carbon. So 1, 2, 3, 4. And again, this is the skeletal form. Let's take a look at this one right here. So a couple of things. I'm going to go ahead and number this. We're actually not going to name something this complicated, but we're numbered from this. I'm going to call this number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And the reason is because I got bromine on this side. So bromine is going to be on carbon number 1. So we're going to label it. Again, we'll go through the rules for naming, but this is basically how we're going to do. We have a carbon-carbon double bond. So a couple of things. Remember, each carbon wants to have 4 bonds. So if I look at carbon number 2, it has 1 bond to hydrogen, another bond to carbon number 1, and it has a double bond to carbon number 3. So that's 4 bonds total. So again, when I say 4 bonds, it could be a double bond, single bond, triple bond, etc. So I'm going to draw the condensed form of this. And again, what you want to do is kind of like I would kind of pause the camera and try to see if you can do it, and then see if you match up with my results. So to go ahead and do this now, I'm going to do this is carbon number 1. I'm going to say CH2Br. So again, it's carbon number 1. Carbon number 2, I'm going to say CH. That's a double bond. So we're actually going to have to show the double bond. Otherwise, it's understood to be a single bond. Then carbon number 3 is carbon number 2. Carbon number 3, CH. Number 4, CH2. So let me just kind of. So CH2, and then carbon number 5, CH3. So So again, we have to show the double bond for this condensed structure, otherwise people think it's going to be a single bond. Let's go ahead and do the skeletal structure. So in the skeletal structure, again, we don't draw any hydrogens in there, but we are going to draw the bromine, and we are going to show the double bond. So let me go ahead and just do this. So let's call this carbon 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. A couple of things. You can actually draw it with this one up first. So this is the same thing. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So again, they're the same as each other. Just any way you want to do it, it's going to be fine. So carbon number 1, I got a bromine, so I'm going to push, let me erase this. I'm going to push a bromine there. From 2 to 3, I have a double bond, so I'm going to show the double bond right there. So this right here, that's going to be the skeletal structure of that. So let's go ahead and finish this up. So in this case, I have the expanded form. I'm going to go ahead and label it. So I got, this is called an alcohol group, functional group. This one right here, we're going to start right here because that's going to be on the first carbon. So I'm going to say carbon number 1, 2, 3. One thing also when I'm doing the condensed and the skeletal form, notice on carbon number 3, I have what they call a methyl group. So this is a methyl group, which is essentially this. Okay, so it's a carbon. So replace the hydrogen now. It's going to be bonded to carbon number 3. So to draw the condensed form, I'm just going to do this. So I'm going to say CH2OH, CH2, do like this. So what that parentheses means, this carbon right here, I have a CH3 group, and then this right here I have CH3. So this is the condensed form. A couple of things. Sometimes to start putting parentheses, because sometimes it can be a little confusing, we can just draw a methyl group up like that on carbon number 2. So again, you can draw it a couple of different ways. They're all going to be perfectly correct. To do the skeleton form right here, so again, we got to do the vertexes here. Let me go ahead and just do this. I'll call this number 1, 2, 3, 4. So whenever I do this, the skeleton form, I do like to draw out the numbers on there, just so I can keep track. So on carbon number 1, I have an OH. I got to draw the OH. So again, we don't draw hydrogens by themselves, but everything else we do draw. And then on carbon number 3, I have a CH3 group. So to do that one, let me go right here. I'm just going to draw a line like this. So this right here, that represents CH3, the CH3 group.